Chapter 1. The Vault. The world ended quietly, without ceremony, without warning, and without mercy. It happened long before you were born, long before anyone still alive could remember the sky as anything other than a legend. What remained of humanity retreated underground, sealed behind massive steel doors meant not to save the world, but simply to preserve a small, carefully chosen piece of it. This is where the story of Fallout truly begins, in the dim, humming corridors of Vault 13. Vault 13 lies deep beneath Mount Whitney, hidden by tons of rock and designed to remain closed for more than a century. It is not a place of adventure, nor a place of dramatic change. It is a place of routine, of quiet survival, of generations born into a world they never chose. For the people inside, the wasteland above might as well be a myth, a frightening bedtime story about scorched landscapes and endless radiation. The only world anyone here has ever known begins with recycled air and ends with reinforced steel. Each day follows the same gentle rhythm, the hum of machinery, the muffled conversations in the dining hall, the soft clatter of tools in the maintenance wing. The vault's lighting never changes. It is always the same warm, artificial glow, neither sunrise nor sunset. Children in Vault 13 grow up without the concept of weather. Rain is something they only read about in old pre-war textbooks. Wind is a scientific term. Clouds exist only as images in flickering educational holotapes. The overseer, a cautious and thoughtful man named Jacorin, keeps strict watch over the vault's systems and its people. His office overlooks the central hall, though overlook is an exaggeration. The vault is compact, close, and structured. Every corridor leads somewhere familiar. Every door has a purpose. Every citizen has a job. Technicians maintaining air filtration units, water specialists checking purification cycles, medics tending to the minor injuries that come from confined living. Even recreation is scheduled, predictable, and safe. Life is calm here. Boring, some whisper, but safe. The most important machine in Vault 13, the one every technician fears more than any other, is the water chip. This small, fragile piece of technology quietly oversees the purification of every drop of water the vault uses. Without it, the vault would not last more than a few months. Without water, the lights, the food, and the comfortable monotony would all collapse. The overseer has entire shelves of records emphasizing its importance. Most people go through their lives never thinking about it, but the few who understand its role respect it like a sacred relic. You grew up listening to the hum of pumps, alarms, and ventilation fans. You learned basic science, history, and survival theory through hollow disks. You learned to follow rules, to trust the overseer, to keep your curiosity gentle and contained. The vault encouraged stability, obedience, and order. And in return, it offered safety, community, and the promise that someday, far in the future, its door might open again. But as the years passed, tiny malfunctions began to appear. A sensor flickered. A purifier clogged more often than usual. Technicians whispered that the water chip was aging. Most of the population didn't notice, and the overseer didn't want to worry them. But you could feel the tension in the maintenance wing whenever the subject came up. Water was life. Without it, there was nothing. When the inevitable happened, it arrived quietly. A soft alarm in the middle of the night, barely loud enough to wake most people. You, being a light sleeper, rose to hear technicians exchanging worried comments in the hall. The overseer's voice soon followed, calm yet strained, asking for patience and requesting all non-essential residents remain in their quarters. By morning, the announcement came. The water chip was failing. The overseer tried to reassure everyone, but even in his controlled, well-rehearsed tone, there was a tremor. The chip could no longer filter enough water. Reserves were shrinking. Rationing began immediately. People grew anxious. For the first time in your life, conversations in the dining hall were not about hobbies or routine tasks. They were about fear, quiet and heavy. Vault 13 had no replacement, no backup. The one machine designed to last centuries had reached its end. The overseer convened a mandatory meeting in the central hall. He spoke seriously about the situation, explaining that the vault could not survive more than 4 or 5 months without a functioning chip. He explained that the other vaults, scattered across the wastes, might hold replacements. He explained that, according to old maps, the nearest one, Vault 15, was within walking distance. For someone willing to make the journey. He wasn't just explaining. He was preparing everyone for the unanswered question hanging in the air. Who would volunteer to leave the vault for the first time in generations? People looked at one another in silence. Stepping outside the vault was unthinkable, terrifying, forbidden for a lifetime. And yet, it had to be done. The overseer chose you. Not because you were the strongest or the most skilled, but because you had something rarer, calm determination and a willingness to follow instructions without hesitation. You were trained in basic survival, had a level-headed temperament, and, more importantly, could be trusted not to abandon the mission for selfish reasons. He spoke to you privately, in his dimly lit office, the heavy steel door closing behind you like a sentence being passed. He told you the truth. The vault's survival depended on you. He handed you a battered Pip-Boy 2000, loaded with a rudimentary map. He explained the dangers, radiation, creatures mutated by the fallout, hostile survivors, and the unknown itself. As he talked, you looked past him at the vault door. Massive, circular, a metal sun frozen in place. Its bolts had not moved once in over 80 years. You had grown up beside it and never expected to see it open. Yet, here you were, preparing to step through it. The overseer placed a hand on your shoulder, a rare gesture of emotion from a man who preferred distance. His expression was steady, but his eyes held fear disguised as hope. He instructed you to bring back a water chip from Vault 15. He reminded you over and over, without it, everyone you know will die. Your pack was small, supplies were limited. Your pistol was old, maintained but untested outside training simulations. You could feel the vault's air against your skin, warm, filtered, predictable. Soon, you would breathe real air, cold, wild, unfiltered. The idea alone felt unreal. When the final moment arrived, residents gathered in silence. They watched from a safe distance as the overseer initiated the opening sequence. The machinery screamed louder than you expected, hydraulic presses hissing like waking beasts. Then the great vault door, 100 tons of steel, shuddered, rolled aside, and revealed something no one had seen in generations. Darkness, dust, and a world waiting beyond. You stepped forward. The overseer's last words echoed behind you. "Good luck. We're counting on you." The door slid shut once more, sealing the vault behind you with a final, echoing clang. For the first time in your life, you were alone, and the wasteland stretched out ahead, silent, endless, unforgiving. Your journey had begun. Chapter 2. The Wasteland. The moment the vault door sealed shut behind you, the quiet world you had always known vanished. The thick steel barrier, once a comforting symbol of safety, became a reminder that you could no longer turn back. The echo of its closing faded into the air, leaving only silence, an unfamiliar, heavy silence that stretched out across a landscape you had never seen except in faded pre-war images. You stood at the mouth of the cave that housed Vault 13. The light outside was harsh, almost startling compared to the warm glow of the vault's artificial panels. Your eyes needed time to adjust. The sun, something you had known only from holotape illustrations, hung above you like a white-hot disk in a dusty sky. It wasn't the soft, golden thing you imagined. It was sharp and unforgiving. You took your first breath of open air. It was dry, cold, carrying faint smells of dust, stone, and old winds that had traveled long distances across ruined earth. Breathing felt strange at first, as though the air itself resisted. There was nothing recycled or controlled about it. The rocky mountains around the vault were jagged, barren, and silent. No signs of life, no green vegetation, no animals moving across the horizon. Just endless stone shaped by centuries of abandonment. The world before you felt larger than anything your imagination could have prepared for. You glanced down at your Pip-Boy. A blinking cursor marked the vault's location, and a crude outline pointed east, toward the vague direction of Vault 15. There were no detailed trails, no shortcuts, only a rough suggestion of where others might have built shelters long ago. You took your first steps. The ground crunched beneath your boots, dry gravel and bone-white dust shifting underfoot. Every sound seemed too loud. Your steps, your breathing, even the slight rustle of your gear. The wasteland had a strange emptiness to it, a sense that the world was trying to remember how to exist after being forgotten. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, delivering a heat that clung to your skin. You stopped occasionally to sip warm water from a small canteen, aware that your supply was precious. There were no refill stations here, no water fountains. Every drop mattered. Along the way, you noticed remnants of the old world, broken highway signs bent by unknown forces, shattered concrete, metal skeletons of cars half buried in sand, a rusting mailbox with no house left around it. Each relic was a quiet reminder of what once existed. Lives were lived here, ordinary lives, filled with routines and hopes not so different from those inside Vault 13. But whatever they had been, whatever they had planned, it was all swept away in 2 hours of fire and light in 2077. The silence changed as you moved farther from the mountain. The wind began to whisper against the rocks, and the land opened around you. As the sun lowered into the horizon, the shadows grew long, stretching across the ground like dark fingers, searching for something lost. You reached a small plateau and decided to rest. You weren't ready to sleep, but you needed to gather your thoughts. The wasteland felt enormous, and Vault 15 seemed impossibly far away. But your mission was clear. Bring back a water chip and save everyone you knew. As the light faded, you heard something new, the faint chirping of insects, or perhaps mutated creatures living unseen in the cracks of the land. The sound wasn't threatening, but it reminded you that you were not as alone as you felt. Your journey continued into the following days, slow and steady. The wasteland was vast, and each step brought new discoveries. Sometimes the terrain sloped gently. Other times it rose in sudden cliffs that forced you to take long detours. The nights were bitterly cold, colder than anything you had experienced in the controlled climate of the vault. Sleeping under the open sky felt unreal. You wrapped yourself in a thin blanket and watched the stars, uncountable, ancient, silent. You had known stars only from diagrams, yet here they were, stretching across the sky in shimmering patterns. They were beautiful, but they also made you feel small. Beneath them, the world seemed enormous, mysterious, and unsupervised. On the third day, you encountered the first signs of life beyond insects. In the distance, a group of small horned creatures, Brahmin calves, wandered across a dry field, chewing at sparse weeds. They watched you warily but didn't run. Their twin heads turned in opposite directions, scanning for threats. You had read about Brahmin, but seeing them in person was strange, surreal. They were living proof that the world above hadn't ended completely. Life had adapted, twisted, and continued. Farther east, you spotted your first human settlement, shabby huts, patched fences, and lean scavengers moving quietly around a cluster of makeshift homes. Junktown. According to the Pip-Boy's map notes, it was one of the few communities where outsiders were tolerated. You approached cautiously, hands open, keeping your pistol holstered to avoid misunderstandings. The guards at the entrance gave you hard stares but didn't raise their weapons. One of them stepped forward, his leather armor cracked by years of sun and sand. He asked who you were and what you wanted. You told him the truth. You were from Vault 13, searching for a replacement water chip. The man didn't seem surprised. Travelers came through with all kinds of strange stories. He simply nodded and waved you inside, warning you to keep your head low and your trouble lower. Junktown was small but lively. People bartered for food and ammunition. A mechanic worked on a broken generator. Two merchants argued loudly over a shipment of mutated fruit. A dog slept lazily in the shade of a rusted metal sheet. Life here was harsh but real, messy, imperfect, and full of noise, unlike the sterile quiet of the vault. You spoke to some of the locals, hoping for information about Vault 15. A trader with tired eyes and a sunburned face told you it wasn't far, maybe a day or two on foot. But he also warned that the area was dangerous. Raiders roamed near the ruins, and earthquakes had caused parts of the old vault to collapse. Still, it was your only lead. Before leaving Junktown, you rested in a small communal shelter where travelers sometimes slept. The thin mattress was lumpy, but it felt luxurious compared to the cold ground of the wasteland. As you closed your eyes that night, you thought of Vault 13, of the people waiting, of the hum of the machinery, of the steady pulse of safety you had taken for granted. You were determined not to fail them. At dawn, you left Junktown and headed toward the ruins of Vault 15. The land became even rougher. Crumbling hillsides, fractured earth, and stretches of cracked asphalt that had once been highways. Along the way, you spotted abandoned encampments, broken signs warning of danger, and distant smoke rising from unknown camps or settlements. As you got closer to the coordinates marked on your Pip-Boy, the feeling of anticipation grew. Vault 15 was near. The answers you needed might be behind those old walls. A water chip could be waiting inside, ready to save everyone. But the wasteland had its own ideas. As you approached a valley filled with twisted metal and scattered debris, you heard distant howls, sharp, wild, and echoing across the rocks. Something was out there, watching, and you kept walking, because you had to. Chapter 3, Vault 15. Vault 15 did not appear the way you imagined it would. You expected something like Vault 13, solid, intact, protected by a mountain of stone. Instead, the entrance looked wounded. The ground around it had split from long-ago earthquakes, and the steel framework of the surrounding cave had buckled. Nature, time, and violence had all left their marks here. When you reached the edge of the ravine that led to the vault entrance, the wind blew dust around your boots. Your Pip-Boy chimed softly, confirming the coordinates. This was the place. This was where another vault had once sheltered hundreds of people during the Great War. But now, it felt like nothing more than the dry skeleton of something that used to breathe. The large metal door that once sealed Vault 15 was missing, torn from its hinges decades ago. Only a twisted ring of scorched steel remained, half buried in rubble. Whatever happened here, it had not been peaceful. You stepped forward, feeling a cold shiver as you crossed the threshold. The air inside was stale and heavy, smelling of rust, dust, and something faintly sour, like the remnants of 1,000 old, forgotten breaths. Your footsteps echoed in the dim corridor. Unlike Vault 13, where the air hummed with life, the halls of Vault 15 were still. Dead still. No flickering lights, no buzzing panels, no comforting mechanical hum, only silence, interrupted occasionally by the distant drip of water seeping through cracked concrete. You switched on your Pip-Boy's light, the beam cutting through the dark. The walls were stained and cracked. Sections of metal paneling had peeled away. You could see deep fractures running across the floor where earthquakes had split the vault's foundation. It was a broken place, far beyond repair. But you had no choice except to keep searching. Somewhere, if you were lucky, one of the old terminals might still hold a clue. Or better yet, maybe a storage room still contained a functioning water chip. It was unlikely, but hope was often the only thing you carried through the wasteland. You began exploring room by room. Living quarters lay in ruins, mattresses shredded, lockers torn open long ago, desks crushed beneath fallen beams. The walls bore marks of struggle, deep scratches, faint burns, and strange gouges you couldn't explain. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't a slow decay. Something violent had taken place. Your steps took you deeper, descending into lower levels where the damage grew worse. Entire sections of hallway had collapsed into rubble. Support beams bent inward like melted metal. More than once, you had to squeeze through narrow gaps or climb over piles of debris just to continue forward. Eventually, you reached what should have been the storage wing. Your heart beat faster. If the water chip had survived anywhere, it would be here. But when you entered the room, your hope flickered. The storage units were empty. Every shelf was bare. Crates had been smashed open decades ago. The water purification systems were ripped apart, wires dangling like torn roots. It was clear. Vault 15 had been looted long ago. Still, you searched. You pored through broken machinery, overturned boxes, and scattered metal scraps. But there was nothing. No water chip, no backup system, nothing except dust and the faint smell of mold where water had seeped in over the years. You leaned against a cracked wall, exhaustion washing over you. The thought of returning to Vault 13 empty-handed felt like a weight pressing down on your chest. The people back home, your friends, your family, even the overseer with his careful voice, they were depending on you. And here you were in a dead vault, with nothing to bring back. You forced yourself to breathe, slowly, calmly, even when panic whispered in the back of your mind. Then, something caught your eye. Scratches on the wall near an emergency exit. Not random scratches, but carved symbols. Letters, a message. You brought the light closer and read it. We left. We took everything. The surface awaits. The followers. You whispered the name under your breath. The followers. You had heard of them in Junktown, rumors of a group that once emerged from Vault 15 and eventually settled in Shady Sands, a small but growing community east of here. If they took everything, including the water chip technology, maybe, just maybe, they could help you. It wasn't much, but it was hope. And in the wasteland, hope kept you walking. You made your way to the exit, climbing through cracked tunnels until the dim light of the wasteland greeted you once more. The sky was streaked with orange and gold, as beautiful as it was harsh. You stood at the mouth of the ruined Vault 15 and looked east. Somewhere beyond the horizon was Shady Sands, your next destination. As you began the journey, the land gradually changed. The rocky hills softened into rolling dunes of dust and sparse grass. Windmills appeared in the distance, their blades spinning lazily. Stray Brahmin grazed on dry shrubs. The world felt slightly more alive here, less hostile, though still far from safe. Hours later, as the sun dipped low, you saw a small cluster of homes, wooden structures surrounded by simple fences with people moving in the dusty streets. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Dogs barked lazily. A guard at the gate nodded as you approached, though he eyed your vault suit with curiosity. "Welcome to Shady Sands," he said. "Don't cause trouble." Inside, the settlement felt warm, not in temperature, but in spirit. People greeted each other. Children played with worn-out toys. Farmers tended small patches of crops struggling to grow in the dry soil. It was humble, but it was alive. More alive than anything you had seen since leaving Vault 13. You were approached by a kind-looking woman with sandy hair tied back in a loose knot. She introduced herself as Tandy, daughter of the town's leader. She was friendly, curious, and clearly fascinated by your arrival. When you explained you were searching for a water chip, her expression shifted. She had heard of them, but Shady Sands did not have one. Their water came from a well, manual, simple, fragile. But she knew stories about Vault 15's former residents. They had once left the vault with supplies and technology, but over the years their group had scattered. Some became nomads, some joined raider clans, others vanished into the wasteland. Tandy suggested you speak with her father, Aradesh, a stern but thoughtful man who led the community. In the dim light of his humble office, he listened carefully to your story. He told you plainly, "You will not find your water chip here, but perhaps..." The people who left Vault 15, some of them, went south to a place of metal and machines. The hub. If answers exist, they will be there. The hub. A huge trading city. A dangerous place, but full of information. You thanked him. He reminded you that the wasteland was harsh and that Shady Sands had its own threats. Raiders, mutated creatures, and dry seasons that made farming difficult. Yet despite all this, the town stood strong. As night settled over Shady Sands, you were offered a place to sleep. A simple bed, a thin blanket, a roof that creaked softly in the cool breeze. You closed your eyes, listening to the quiet sounds of a living town. Dogs barking, a baby crying somewhere in the distance, the soft murmur of people settling in for the night. The road ahead was still long, your mission still uncertain. But you were no longer walking blindly. There were leads now, directions, new hope. Tomorrow, you would head south, toward the hub, where traders, scavengers, and wanderers crossed paths. Somewhere among them, you hoped, was the key to saving Vault 13. Chapter 4. The hub morning in Shady Sands arrived quietly. A soft breeze pushed through the settlement, carrying the scent of dry earth and the distant sound of Brahmin lowing. You rose early, gathered your supplies, and thanked the people who had given you shelter. The warmth of the town lingered with you as you left, a comforting memory to carry into the harsher parts of the wasteland. The path to the hub lay south, a long and winding journey across open plains, cracked desert, and forgotten roads. You walked steadily, letting the sun rise behind you. your shadow stretching long and thin across the dust. Travelers before you had worn faint trails into the land, footprints, Brahmin tracks, wagon wheel grooves, but the desert wind erased them quickly. Each day you spent out here reminded you how small you were compared to the vastness around you. You encountered little trouble at first. Occasional packs of stray dogs would watch from afar, their ears perked, but their bodies too thin to risk a fight. Scavengers wandered like ghosts between piles of metal scraps. A few even waved to you, as though simply grateful to see another human face in the endless emptiness. Nights were cold, colder than the mountains near Vault 13. You wrapped your blanket tightly around yourself and watched the stars. They burned silently above you, ancient and indifferent. The longer you stayed outside, the more you understood why people built towns, why they gathered around fires and walls. Solitude, even peaceful solitude, could swallow your thoughts if you weren't careful. On the 5th day of travel, the land around you changed again. The air grew warmer, heavier. Strange metal towers appeared on the horizon, broken, bent, half-collapsed relics of some enormous pre-war structure. You followed a cracked highway leading toward them. As you approached, you saw something unusual. Smoke rising, but not the chaotic smoke of raiders or burning ruins. This was steady, controlled, purposeful. Civilization, a larger one than anything you had seen yet. The Hub, a sprawling trading city built from the bones of old-world warehouses. Rusted metal walls rose around it in uneven patterns, patched together with scrap and reinforced with scavenged beams. Guards patrolled watchtowers overlooking the entrance. People, many people, moved in long lines through the main gate, pushing Brahmin caravans, carrying boxes, dragging carts, or shouting orders. It was overwhelming at first. After days of silence, the noise washed over you like a wave. Merchants haggled loudly. Caravan masters barked to their workers. The clang of metal echoed from repair shops. Laughter came from a nearby bar. And everywhere there were faces, tired, sunburned, determined faces, each belonging to someone trying to survive in a world without guarantees. At the gate, a guard in worn leather armor stopped you. His hand rested casually on the grip of his rifle, though his eyes didn't look unfriendly. "First time in the Hub?" he asked. You nodded. "Then welcome. Keep your nose clean and your caps ready. People here don't have patience for trouble." With that, he waved you inside. Immediately, you were swallowed by the chaotic beauty of the Hub. Rows of stalls displayed everything imaginable. Old pre-war machine parts, bundles of dried food, rusty pistols, machetes, clothing patched and repatched until only scraps of the original fabric remained. Traders called out to you, offering deals, shouting over one another. A Brahmin caravan lumbered past, its handlers shouting to keep the beasts moving. The city had a scent, dust mixed with fried food, gun oil, sweat, and old wood. Compared to the sterile air of Vault 13, it felt alive, layered, real. Your task here was clear. Find anyone who knew about Vault 15's former inhabitants, or, if you were incredibly lucky, someone with access to advanced technology. You began your search at the water merchant's headquarters, a huge building marked with faded blue paint and a stylized droplet symbol. Inside, workers sorted crates and filled barrels, while the head merchant, a stern man named Thaler, oversaw transactions. When you mentioned the water chip, he frowned deeply. "A chip? From a vault? We don't deal in that sort of tech. Too rare, too fragile. Even if we found one, it'd be worth more than a town like Shady Sands." You asked if anyone else in the Hub might know more. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Maybe the Crimson Caravan, maybe the Fargo traders. But if I had to guess, the people who left Vault 15 split up over the years. Some moved east, some became raiders. A few might have made it here. Check the downtown district, ask around the old warehouses. Someone must have heard something. With that, he dismissed you. You spent the next hours crossing the hub from district to district. Downtown was packed with bars, supply shops, and makeshift homes stacked on top of old pre-war buildings. You spoke with merchants, wanderers, guards, even drifters resting beside Brahmin pens. Many spoke about Vault 15, stories of earthquakes, collapses, and migrations, but no one had a water chip or knew where one might be found. Still, people remembered something useful. More than one mentioned a group that left Vault 15 long ago and settled somewhere far to the south, their descendants having formed a militaristic faction, a group known for discipline, armor, and secrecy. The Brotherhood of Steel. The name hovered in your thoughts long after you left the conversation. You had heard rumors in shady sands, stories of metal-clad soldiers wandering the desert, wielding technology older than most settlements. If anyone had advanced machinery, if anyone could even understand how a water chip worked, it would be them. But they were far away, and they were famously distrustful of outsiders. Evening settled over the hub as you walked toward the central courtyard. Lanterns flickered to life. Merchants shut their stalls. Night guards took their positions. Somewhere in the distance, music drifted from a bar, soft, crackling, played on a scratchy pre-war radio. You found a place to rest in a public bunkhouse. The mattress was worn and smelled faintly of smoke, but after a long day, you barely noticed. You lay back and closed your eyes, letting the muted sounds of the city fade into a calming hum. But sleep didn't come immediately. Your mind replayed everything. Vault 15's ruins, Shady Sand's kindness, the vastness of the desert, and now the chaotic city of the hub. You had followed every lead so far, yet the water chip remained out of reach. You felt the burden of every step, the weight of hundreds of lives depending on your success. Still, there was progress. You weren't lost. You had a new direction, the Brotherhood of Steel, a faction of technology hoarders hidden in a desert fortress. If anyone could point you toward a working chip or a vault that still had one, it would be them. But the journey south was long and dangerous. Raiders prowled the roads. Mutated creatures stalked the night. Sandstorms could bury a traveler in minutes, and the Brotherhood themselves were a mystery. Stories painted them as noble protectors, ruthless militarists, or something in between. You would have to reach them somehow, and you would have to earn their trust. Tomorrow, you decided, you would visit the last district of the hub, Old Town, where scavengers and wanderers sometimes traded information. If anyone knew where the Brotherhood's outpost was, it would be someone there. For now, you let the weight of the day sink into the mattress, your thoughts softening like sand slipping through fingers. You allowed yourself to rest, knowing that tomorrow's journey would carry you farther from home and yet closer to answers. The distant music faded, the lanterns dimmed, and the quiet rhythm of the hub lulled you towards sleep. Chapter 5. The Brotherhood morning drifted slowly into the hub, as if the sun itself hesitated to pierce the layers of dust hanging over the city. You woke to the muted voices of other travelers preparing for their day. Someone argued softly about caravan routes. A Brahmin outside groaned impatiently. Metal clanked against wood as merchants opened their stalls. The world woke up not with energy, but with endurance. Another day survived, another day ahead. After a small meal, thin broth and stale bread, You stepped back into the streets, determined to find the information you needed. The Brotherhood of Steel had become your strongest lead. Not promising, not certain, but possible. And possible was more than you had the day before. Old Town sat at the far edge of the hub, a place where scavengers and wanderers gathered among buildings that looked as though they might collapse at any moment. Rust crawled up their walls. Windows were shattered, patched with cloth or mismatched pieces of metal. Faded graffiti marked corners with warnings. Keep out, raiders, stay armed. You navigated the narrow alleys and open lots carefully. People here were rough around the edges, tired faces, watchful eyes, hands always close to hidden weapons. They weren't hostile, but they were wary. Survival taught them that trust was a costly luxury. You stopped a man sorting through a pile of old electronics. His hands were blackened with grease, his clothes worn thin. "I'm looking for the Brotherhood of Steel," you said. He raised an eyebrow. "Not many go looking for them. Usually it's the other way around." "Do you know where to find them?" He hesitated, glancing around as though checking who might be listening. "Out to the west," he said finally. "Old military bunker, hidden well, entrance sealed tighter than a vault. If you're lucky, they won't shoot at you. If you're unlucky," he shrugged, "well, you won't need a water chip anymore." He pointed roughly toward the wastes. "Follow the broken highway leading west. When you hit the old radio tower, head south. Eventually, you'll find a ridge with a concrete structure buried beneath it. That's them." You thanked him and left quickly, aware that Old Town was not a place to linger. Before leaving the hub entirely, you paused at a small supply shop to restock. The shopkeeper, an older woman missing 2 fingers, offered simple advice in exchange for your caps. "Don't trust anyone wearing too much armor," she muttered as she handed you purified water and a handful of stim packs. "Makes them think they're invincible." You smiled politely. "Noted." With your pack refilled, you stepped outside the walls of the hub. The noise slowly faded behind you until it became nothing more than a distant murmur swallowed by open land. Ahead lay the broken highway, massive slabs of concrete split by nature and time. You followed its fractured path, keeping your eyes alert for danger. Hours passed under the relentless sun. The air shimmered with heat. Dust clung to your vault suit. Even the wind seemed exhausted. But as the day drew on, you spotted the old pre-war radio tower. It stood twisted but tall, its metal frame creaking whenever the wind passed through. You rested briefly beneath its shadow, drinking small sips of water, then continued south as instructed. The land grew barren again, fewer rocks, fewer signs of life. Only dry shrubs fought to survive here. A sense of isolation settled over you, deeper and heavier than before. Even in the vast wasteland, there were degrees of emptiness, and this place felt like a desert built on top of a desert. Toward late afternoon, you saw the ridge. It rose subtly from the land, a gentle rise rather than a dramatic cliff. At first you saw nothing below it, only more dust and cracked earth. But as you got closer, you spotted a faint outline. Concrete, reinforced steel, a bunker, a doorway built into the ridge, mostly buried beneath rubble, but unmistakably intact. Your heart beat faster. This was it, the Brotherhood's outpost. You approached cautiously. 2 guards emerged from behind hidden slits in the rock. Tall, powerful figures wearing full suits of power armor, not patched metal plates or scavenged protection. Real power armor, the kind you'd only seen in vault educational holotapes, standing proudly beside soldiers of the US Army. They were intimidating in a way nothing else had been, The armor hummed with energy. Their shadows stretched long across the dirt. "Halt," one of them commanded, his voice metallic through the helmet's speakers. "State your business." You swallowed. "I'm from Vault 13. I'm searching for a water purification chip. Our vault is dying." The guards exchanged a glance, then stepped aside with mechanical precision. "Enter," the first one said. "The elder will decide whether you're worth speaking to." The steel door behind them groaned open, revealing a stark, dimly lit hallway. As you walked inside, the artificial lighting reminded you faintly of Vault 13, though colder, harsher, lacking the familiarity of home. Deeper within, you found yourself surrounded by Brotherhood members, some repairing weapons, others training in a large chamber, their armor clanking with each movement. The base felt like a fortress carved from discipline and routine. Everything was purposeful, ordered, efficient. A knight escorted you to a room where Elder Maxon awaited. His presence was commanding without being intimidating. He looked older than most, but not weak. Someone who had carried responsibility for so long that it had shaped his posture and his gaze. "I hear you seek technology," he said. "I seek survival," you replied. "My vault's water chip has failed. Without a replacement, we will run out of water in months." Maxon studied you carefully. "Technology is precious. The wasteland destroys knowledge faster than we can preserve it, and you ask for something rare." You nodded slowly. "I understand, but if there's any chance—" "There is not," he interrupted. "We do not possess a spare chip." Your heart sank. "But," he continued, "we do possess information." You looked up, hope flickering. "Our scouts have reported unusual super mutant activity to the north," Maxon said. "They are organized, strong, growing, and they are not natural. Something or someone is creating them." You frowned. "What does that have to do with my vault?" "Everything," he replied. "Super mutants have been raiding caravans carrying advanced technology. If anyone has stolen vault tech, water chips included, it may be them." The idea chilled you. Super mutants, massive, powerful creatures mutated beyond recognition, were nightmares come to life. Facing them felt impossible. Maxon saw the hesitation in your eyes. You want your vault to survive. That means you must understand the wasteland's deeper threats. Your mission for a water chip intersects with something larger, something dangerous. He leaned forward. "If you want our help, prove yourself. Investigate the source of the mutants. Bring back evidence, and the Brotherhood will provide you with whatever assistance you need." The room felt suddenly smaller, the weight on your shoulders heavier. But the choice wasn't really a choice at all. Vault 13 needed you. Every second you hesitated, their water reserves shrank. You nodded. "I'll do it." Maxon's expression softened slightly. "Then take this." He handed you a small holodisk. "This will allow you access to deeper Brotherhood files, once you've earned it." You left the Elder's chambers with the disk tucked safely in your pack. Walking back through the bunker, you could feel eyes on you, curious, measuring, questioning whether someone with no armor and no military training could handle the nightmare waiting outside. Only one thing was certain. Your journey had shifted. You were no longer just looking for a water chip. You were walking into the heart of a growing darkness, one tied to the wasteland's deepest mystery. Tonight, you would rest at the bunker. Tomorrow, you would head north, toward the unknown, toward danger, toward whatever shadow cast the super mutants into being, and every step would lead you farther from the safety of Vault 13, but closer to saving it. Chapter 6. The Mutants. Sleep inside the Brotherhood bunker was unlike sleep anywhere else in the wasteland. The air was cool, controlled, and strangely quiet. It lacked the warmth of Vault 13 and the lively noise of the hub, but it carried a sense of order, an environment shaped by discipline rather than comfort. You rested deeply, knowing the days to come would challenge you in ways nothing else had. When morning came, the knights and scribes were already at work. The clank of power armor echoed through the halls as soldiers trained, repaired equipment, or prepared for patrols. You moved quietly through the base, observing the precise way the Brotherhood operated, each member performing their duties with an efficiency that bordered on ritual. A young scribe named Jonathan approached you near the mess hall. His robes were stained with grease from machinery he had been repairing. "You're the Vault Wanderer, right?" he asked with a polite smile. "I heard you're heading north. Wanted to wish you luck. The super mutants aren't like the creatures you've seen so far. They're strong, organized, and they aren't wandering randomly. They're following orders." "Orders?" you asked, surprised. "From who?" He shook his head. "We don't know, but someone is controlling them, and that someone is dangerous." The words stayed with you long after you finished your breakfast of hard bread and canned stew. The Brotherhood's warnings were not exaggerated. If the super mutants had stolen technology, if they were gathering strength under leadership, your search for a water chip had tangled itself into something far larger. You spent the remainder of the morning preparing. The Brotherhood provided you with light armor, not power armor, but sturdier than your vault suit. A knight showed you how to reinforce the plating and adjust the straps for better mobility. They also issued you extra ammunition, a few stim packs, and a basic rifle. Nothing extravagant, but enough to keep you alive if things went wrong. Finally, when everything was ready, you stepped outside the bunker. The steel door sealed behind you with a heavy echo. The wasteland stretched out before you again, but now you walked with a new purpose. You were no longer wandering in search of clues. You were tracing a threat that could swallow entire settlements. The Brotherhood scouts had mapped a rough path toward the northern region where mutant sightings had increased. You followed the broken remnants of an old highway system, the cracked asphalt leading through canyons and open plains. The further north you traveled, the quieter the land became. No traders, no scavengers, no Brahmin herds, only wind drifting through skeletal trees and hollowed-out vehicles. By midday, the temperature dropped noticeably. A cold wind carried a strange scent, one you couldn't identify, but it triggered a sense of unease. You tightened your armor and pressed on. Hours later, you spotted something unsettling. Footprints, massive ones, too large for any human, with a weight that pressed deep into the dust like impressions from living statues. They traveled in groups, heading east, organized, purposeful. You crouched, examining them. The ground around the tracks was disturbed, as though something had been dragging heavy crates alongside the marching mutants. You followed the trail until it led you to a ruined rest stop on the edge of a deserted town. The town had no name anymore. Signs had fallen. Buildings had collapsed. Windows were shattered. It felt like a ghost of a ghost, emptier than empty, stripped of every sign of life. You walked quietly through the abandoned streets. A rusted truck lay overturned near a broken gas pump. A faded billboard hung crookedly, its paint flaking under decades of sun and sand. The silence was absolute. Then, from somewhere inside a nearby building, you heard a low, heavy thud, followed by another and another. You froze. A moment later, a giant shadow passed across a shattered window. Super mutant. You pressed yourself against a crumbling wall, breathing slowly, silently. You peeked around the corner just as the creature stepped into view. It was enormous, at least 7 feet tall, with thick green skin that looked as solid as stone. Muscles bulged under its armor, which was made from mismatched metal plates. Its face was blunt, powerful, almost expressionless, except for the constant scowl that seemed carved into its features. It carried a huge weapon over its shoulder, something between a rifle and a cannon. It didn't see you. You watched it carefully. It wasn't alone. 3 more mutants stepped out behind it, dragging a crate marked with faded pre-war symbols. One of them spoke, its voice deep and rough, like gravel grinding inside a metal drum. "Move. Base is close. Master wants results." The others grunted in agreement. You stayed completely still as they disappeared down the street, their heavy footsteps fading slowly into the distance. When they were far enough away, you cautiously followed their trail. Not close enough to be seen, but close enough to understand their direction. The tracks led north, to a valley shaped like a broken scar carved between 2 cliffs. Strange metal poles jutted from the ground. Torn banners flapped weakly in the wind. The further you went, the more signs of activity you found. Discarded crates, burned-out fires, and footprints by the dozens. This wasn't just a patrol route. This was a pathway to something bigger. A base. A stronghold. By dusk, you reached the edge of the valley. From a vantage point on a small rise, you saw it clearly. A massive building rising from the ground, partially built from old pre-war structures, but reinforced with scavenged metal. Guards, super mutants, patrolled the perimeter, their weapons gleaming. Your heart pounded. This was the source. This was where the super mutants gathered. This was where something terrible waited. You settled behind a rock outcrop, observing carefully. You needed evidence, just as Elder Maxon demanded. Proof of how the mutants operated, proof of who controlled them, proof of what they planned next. But before you could decide how to gather that proof, you noticed something unexpected. At the center of the mutant stronghold, near a massive door of rusted steel, stood a figure unlike the others. A mutant, yes, but different. Taller, broader, its skin darker and marked with glowing veins. It wore armor unlike anything else you had seen. Sleek, reinforced, almost ceremonial, it radiated authority, and it spoke with a clarity the others lacked. "Prepare for expansion," it said. "The Master will see our work soon. All must be ready. No delays." The Master, a name spoken with reverence, the leader behind the mutants, the architect of their rise. You needed to know more. Carefully, silently, you retreated before darkness fully swallowed the valley. You couldn't risk discovery. You found a hidden place to rest, a small alcove between 2 boulders overlooking the valley from a safe distance. There, under a sky filled with cold, glittering stars, you recorded everything onto your Pip-Boy. Tracks, organization, weapons, crates, the command structure, the word Master. It was enough. Enough to prove that something far more dangerous than raiders threatened the wasteland. Enough to show the Brotherhood that their warnings were justified. Enough to send a chill through your spine even as the night settled around you. You tried to sleep, but sleep came slowly. Your thoughts circled around what you had seen, the towering mutants, the strange leader, the looming fortress. You wondered how this connected to your mission for a water chip. Why would mutants steal vault technology? How did they know about it? Who was the Master? And how long before Vault 13 found itself in their path? Eventually, exhaustion claimed you. The night passed in uneasy slumber. When morning returned, pale and cold, you knew what had to be done. You would return to the Brotherhood. You would share everything. And from there, your journey, already larger than you imagined, would grow larger still, because now the fate of the wasteland was tied to yours. Chapter 7. The Master. The journey back south toward the Brotherhood bunker felt heavier than the one that brought you north. Not physically. Your steps were steady, your supplies sufficient. But mentally, the weight of what you had witnessed sat like stone in your chest. You had gone searching for a water chip, but instead, you had stumbled upon the seeds of something far bigger, a force rising quietly in the wasteland, a force preparing to reshape it. The super mutant fortress still haunted your thoughts, towering figures marching in formation, crates of stolen technology hauled into their base, the strange leader speaking with unnatural intelligence, and the ominous mention of the Master. Whoever, or whatever, the Master was, the mutants served him with absolute devotion. As you walked beneath a pale morning sun, you replayed every detail, preparing for the moment Elder Maxon would ask what you found. You knew the Brotherhood would take it seriously. They had warned you that the wasteland held more than scattered dangers. They sensed a pattern growing. You had now seen it for yourself. It took almost 2 days to return to the bunker. The wind was sharp, carrying the chill of the northern mountains. Dust clung to your hair, your armor, your boots. But finally, the familiar ridge appeared ahead, rising like a silent guardian above the wasteland. You approached the hidden entrance cautiously. The guards at the door recognized you immediately, stepping aside with efficient movements that revealed silent respect. Inside, everything moved with the same steady purpose. Scribes bent over glowing terminals. Knights adjusted their armor with hydraulic hisses. The air felt thick with anticipation, as though the bunker itself sensed that something important had shifted. You were escorted directly to Elder Maxon. He waited for you in his narrow chamber, standing beside a worn map spread across a metal table. Lines marked caravan routes, settlement locations, and known mutant sightings. When he looked up, his expression was calm but keen, as if he already suspected what you had learned. "Report," he said simply. You told him everything: the organized patrols, the stolen technology, the crates dragged across the valley, the command structure among the mutants, the massive base hidden in the north, and finally, the tall, intelligent mutant who spoke of expansion and obedience to someone called the Master. Maxon listened without interruption. Not once did he show surprise. Not once did he look confused. When you finished, silence filled the room. He exhaled slowly. "So it is as we feared," he said. "And worse." He stepped back from the table and motioned for you to sit, though he remained standing. "The super mutants are not accidents of the wasteland," he explained. "They're not wildlife twisted by radiation. They're part of a project, controlled, planned, directed. Someone is creating them, someone with access to technology far beyond anything we have seen since the war." You felt a chill. "The Master?" "Most likely." Maxon crossed his arms. "Years ago, our scouts found hints of an old military research program, something involving biological manipulation, forced evolution, a virus capable of rewriting the human body entirely. We never found the source, but we found traces, enough to worry us." You stared at him, and now the mutants are the result. He finished for you. The Master is using that technology, expanding his army, taking what he needs, building something colossal in the shadows. He leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "This is no longer about a water chip," he said quietly. "This is about the survival of the human race as we know it." The words hit you like a blow. "But I still have to save my vault," you insisted. "And you will," he said firmly. But understand this, if the Master succeeds, Vault 13 won't matter. No settlement will matter. Every human he captures becomes another soldier in his army. Every town will fall. Every vault will be emptied. Your throat tightened. What do you want me to do? You asked. Maxon walked to a small metal chest, opened it, and withdrew a holodisk. Return to Vault 13 with this, he said. Give it to your overseer. It contains everything we know about the mutant threat, and it will help you persuade him that the danger is real. Then, once you have informed them, you must track down the source of these mutants. You must locate the Master's base. You stared at the holodisk resting in your hands. I can't do this alone, you said quietly. You won't, Maxon replied. We will support you when the time comes. But first, we must prepare, and you must warn your people. You nodded, though the path ahead felt larger than anything you had imagined when you first stepped out of Vault 13. That night, you slept uneasily, despite the bunker's relative comfort. Dreams swirled in your mind, glimpses of green giants marching through dust storms, vault doors torn open, the Master standing in shadows too deep to see through. When you woke, sweat chilled your skin. You prepared your gear at dawn, grateful for movement. The Brotherhood supplied you with additional ammunition and an upgraded rifle. Jonathan, the scribe you met earlier, wished you luck again, though his face carried more worry than before. You're walking into the center of a storm, he said softly. But storms reveal things too. Stay alive. We'll be counting on you. You left the Brotherhood bunker with a new purpose. You were no longer searching for clues. You were delivering a warning. The desert felt different now. Not empty. Watched. Not quiet. Listening. Not dead. Waiting. The return journey to Vault 13 took several days. Each night, you camped under the stars, aware that at any moment, a mutant patrol or raider band could appear over a ridge. But luck, or fate, carried you through the wasteland safely. When the familiar mountain range finally came into view, your chest tightened. You walked through the rocky passage, climbed the final slope, and stood before the cave entrance of Vault 13. You approached the intercom. "This is," you began, but your voice cracked. You hadn't spoken to your people in weeks. You exhaled, steadied yourself, and tried again. "This is the Vault Scout. I'm back." Moments later, the heavy metal door groaned open. The familiar lights reflected off the walls. Warm air washed over you. For a moment, the urge to collapse overwhelmed you. You were home. The overseer met you in his office, his face lined with anxiety and relief. "You made it," he said, barely containing his emotion. "Did you find it? Did you find the water chip?" Your silence answered him before your words did. "No," you said quietly. "Vault 15 didn't have one, and the hub didn't have one either." His face fell. "Then, what are we going to do?" You placed the Brotherhood holodisk on his desk. "This," you said, "is what we're going to do." You explained the super mutants, the fortress, the Master, the threat rising in the wasteland. The overseer listened with widening eyes. This is catastrophic," he whispered. "If what you say is true, Vault 13 is in danger. Everyone is." You nodded. "That's why we need the Brotherhood. They will help us. But I need your approval to continue. The mutants are taking technology. If they find Vault 13, they'll take us too." The overseer stared at the holodisk, his fingers trembling. "Very well," he said finally. "Continue your mission. Find the Master. Stop him if you can. Save us." You stepped out of his office, feeling the weight of an entire vault pressing onto your shoulders. But beneath that weight, something else flickered. Purpose. You faced the wasteland again, for the final and most dangerous time. The path ahead would take you into the darkest corners of ruined civilization, into the heart of the mutant army, into the domain of the master himself. Your journey began with a failing water chip. It would end with the fate of the wasteland. And somewhere out there, the master waited, patient, powerful, watching the world evolve in the way he believed it must. Your final steps toward him had begun.